So let's start with a new topic. So we finished last time the security protocols. We had a look at, I think, IPsec, and what else did we have to look at? TLS, yes, that was also very prominent. So TLS, it's as you will see, quite many protocols are built the same way. So if we quickly jump into TLS once again, it has a very similar setup as many protocols in that domain. Let me just see, is that right? Yes. So with TLS, you typically have a handshake up front. Yeah. So its aim is security, so meaning confidentiality, integrity, authentication. In order to achieve this, you typically have a handshake up front, where you typically exchange the security credentials. You agree on which security suite to use, what your part of the key is, and both parties give their part of the key, and then you have some key derived, and based on that keys, the security for the data transfer is accomplished. So basically from this handshake you have some kind of master secret. There you have this various keys for both directions, for encryption and for integrity, and they can be reused, recreated, refreshed after time, and after the end you close the connection. Then we had IPsec. The important part there is that you have 4 categories that you need to keep in mind. Let me just have a look. The categories are, first 2 IPsec protocols, authentication header. This is mostly for routing information, where it's important that the source is authenticated, the data is integer, so it has not been changed, but it should be readable by everyone. That's not confidential, but it should be only accepted if it's from the right source. And there's the regular security protocol, encapsulation security protocol, where you have this handshake, you negotiate the keys, you use those keys for authentication and integer and confidential communication. And we had 2 types, the 2 modes. The transfer mode, where basically it's from here to there, so end to end, where 2 end nodes create this kind of tunnel. And we had the tunnel mode, where basically the routers took all traffic that are coming and encrypting it on the way to the other router. The same process also applies here. So first you have this handshake, then you negotiate the keys, then you use the keys, and then you close the connection again. So the networking security protocols are very common in that sense. These are the basic elements that you need to do. So therefore, basically we switch now to a different kind of topic, because the last time we finished our lecture chapter on communication protocols, and now we are looking more into privacy preserving computation, because security of data is basically in 3 categories available. So the one is about, so which did we learn up to now? So we learned about the cryptography elements, which also allows you to encrypt data. That's typically data at rest. Data is encrypted and cannot be accessed by anyone who does not have the key. So data at rest is secured. Then we had data and transmission, so for communication, how 2 parties can communicate. And now we are looking at the 3rd element, and that is data in use, so basically during the computation. And what we want to look into is how to keep data secure, and that means confidential, while you are using it for computation. That's a little bit tricky. But first of all, that's from, so if companies are dealing with data, there's always the risk that they lose it. And and how can companies lose data? That's basically the question. So that's always associated with risks, so losing lots of data. What's the issue with that? So first of all, if you look into losing data, what does it mean? So first of all, there are various sources who got the data, outside attackers, but also often inside attackers, suppliers, social engineering. So you even cannot trust your own people, basically, that they don't misuse the data. critical. So the data type is also very important, especially personal data. Something relating to an identified or identifiable natural person. That's more critically categorized by law. And there are some numbers according to this IBM security report that tells every data set accumulates to $150 per record in compensation and in solving the case. I mean, not to pay the people, but to look into the case, look into compensation as well, and losing also customers. And it takes quite a lot of time to close all potential effects of the case and to recover. So it's quite impactful. And here's some slides on the legal aspect, because we will talk about data and the privacy of data and how to maintain it also while you are computing on it. So the issues, all the companies are accountable for handling their data, and it's not just that they have to pay people for the data they have lost. Often it's not even the case, but bad publicity, loss of customers, and reputational damages for companies. That's the bigger issue. Lost business, the biggest contributor to this data breach costs, obviously. So, and what can happen? So, first of all, there are malicious attacks. Yeah, I mean, attackers can try to obtain data from different directions. Yeah, and I mean, there can be also negligence, so or mistakes that happen, but often there's some kind of malicious root cause for data breaches by hackers, criminals, sometimes also employees, contractors, and so on, through malware, criminal insiders, phishing, social engineering, SQL injection, and so on. And we know that the risk is calculated by multiplying the probability by the cost, and the cost is very high, so even if the probability is small, the risk might be high through the multiplication. So what you have to look into is what kind of options do we have to in the usage of the data, make sure that it's always protected. So we have had a look at cryptography that allows us to encrypt data that is stored somewhere, but you have to deal with the keys. We have then also looked into communication security, where in the data transfer we have this handshake, we negotiate the keys, we communicate securely, but this is one step of many where data is used. Here's some more words on the relevancy of the data, because we are now more talking about the data aspect, especially. So this is for companies operating in Europe. So if you are using data of a data subject, then people have to give their consent that you can collect it. The consent must be given and must be given freely and easy to withdraw. So it should not be bound to any kind of force or so that you cannot use the service if you don't agree. Okay, and as I said, there's a specific higher security level for personal data. That's anything that's related to an identified or identifiable natural person, unique identifiers including IP address, cookies, and so on. It's a little bit vague, because so if I'm telling I don't know, the person in my lecture being 28 years old, that might be only one of you, I don't know. That might be identifiable. So that might be an issue. If I say there's a person who is between 27 and 29, might be still one person and then identifiable. But if I say the person with an age between -10 and 200, that's all relating to something that is identifiable or some personal information, but it's too vague to basically be used. So there's a difference between, if you give the specific data, that's a problem. If you give a range and only a few people fall inside, that's also a problem. If the range is larger and then too many people fall inside, so then it's okay. So there's some kind of undefined boundary how many people might be represented by an information that is acceptable or that it's not acceptable. So it's not really clearly defined. That's the problem of law. Now, well, and the goal is by this European GDPR to basically implement any kind of security measures upfront in the solutions in order to not have an add-on of security, but it should be the basic and the standard approach. So what I want to say is dealing with data is quite critical, and it also comes with lots of burden. And when we are talking about how we deal with data, we always need to have in mind that this should be supported. So it's not just that you have to give consent that your data is used. You also have the right to obtain, basically to know when your data is processed and for what purposes. Yeah. So you also have to tell upfront what you will use the data for as a company. And that's sometimes difficult because I've witnessed many companies who don't know what they will use the data for because they don't know what the data looks like. So typically they say, we want to use the data for any kind of purpose, because if they would make some kind of restriction, they would not be allowed to use it for something else. So most companies try to really, by default, use the data for everything. But it needs to have a clear logging of data, ownership, and usage history. It will become important. And also you have to write that your data is erased. So it's not just that your data is collected and somebody can read it, but you have also the ability to extract your data out of a pool of data. So just think of these large language models that are used for artificial intelligence, and maybe your data is in there somewhere as well. Maybe you wrote a novel or you created a picture or so, and that's in the training data. How can you erase your personal data from that? So this is getting more and more complex. And what is also enforced now is the right to transfer your data from one controller to another. So if there's, for example, a car manufacturer and you log your data where you drove around, then you want to also open it up for other third parties. So to have some data portability so that other kind of applications can emerge. So it's also requested that basically the companies open up their databases so that third parties can offer some kind of business models on top of that. So, and also all these shows that basically the companies are on one side restricted and asked to be very secure in handling their data. On the other side, they should be also able to identify data and to share it. So once there's a legitimate interest. So they cannot just close it and put it in a vault and encrypt it and say that that's all secure. They also need to support the access to it in order to be able to delete something or to hand over to some third party. What's else in just to close up the EU GDPR rights, there is a breach notification required, there's a data protection officer required. But coming back to the point, let me just see. Coming back to the point is that data handling is everywhere, and we have covered only two aspects of it. So basically, when data is created, it might be stored, secured by some encryption, then it's transferred somewhere by some encryption with TLS or something, and then it arrived at the server, and now there's some computation going on. And during the computation, how is the data secured there? That will be the question. So we have these three elements. So data in transit that we covered, that's TLS, IPsec, and so on. We have data at rest, data stored on hard disks, authentication through knowledge, so you need to know the password, confidentiality through encryption and hash, that's fine. But now we have a problem. So basically, if you have the numbers somewhere in your storage, I don't know, this is the number A, this is the number B, they are all encrypted, and you want to sum them, so you want to create the sum of both of them, How do you handle it? So basically, you have to somehow open up a CPU process, and there in your memory you will compute A plus B. And if you have something listening here, then the data might be obtained. So it might be encrypted here, that's fine, but the data still can be retrieved without having your keys. So the question is, if you have a setup where the computing party must not see the contents of the data or the result, how can this be achieved? So how can we achieve that? Let's say the input provider, that's the data provider A, wants its data to be kept private. There's a compute provider B, and the result should be delivered to A again, but B should not learn what it computed. So it should just offer its computing power and data, so the input and the result should be all on the data provider side, but it should not be revealed to the compute party B. So that's basically what we will talk about in this chapter. So what kind of approaches are there? And this is some upcoming element. I mean, not just that. So let's say now in Europe they have discussed this chat surveillance legal activity. So basically where your communication so end-to-end communication over chat software should be somehow made accessible to law enforcement. This is basically where so currently we have some kind of end-to-end security, and that means that the data provider and the result, let's say the answer is all on your side, and the compute or the infrastructure in between can treat it, but it is aimed to break that system. So the question is, what kind of process can you apply here to keep the security of your data? Or if you have some companies, let's look at the examples. So here are the classical examples that are discussed in these scenarios. Basically, you have here discussed who provides the input, who provides the computation, and who gets the result. So in this case, they are the providers that are participating in this secure computation, let's say, multi-party computation. They are all both providing the data, they are computing, and they are getting the results. So typical example is there are two millionaires, and they want to determine who's richer without revealing how much money they have. But it's also applicable in other contexts. So if there are some kind of companies providing biobanks, some genome sequencing companies, they don't want to reveal their genome in knowledge and databases, but they want to check. They want to create some kind of join or some kind of to check the overlap of their database. So how can you have two databases, A and B, and basically either compute the join of it without revealing what you have, or to compute the overlap? Yeah, let me just see whether this example also comes. No, then let's talk also about this. So there has been, for example, also the use case with Google Ads, where the one providing the advertisement, they know who are the customers, so who bought something. So they know, basically, they gave out some ads, and customers, they had more sales. Yeah, sorry. And Google was playing the ads, They just know who watched the ads, and they want to find out whom of the customers who watched the ads also looked at the who of the people who watched the ad also became customers. Google doesn't want to provide information who all saw the video. The company doesn't want to reveal the full set of customers, So they have some kind of secure approach how they combine the common knowledge, so to identify the common data set. This will be also one of the examples. What is also very common is that the data provider and calculator is so there are companies who are both data providers and supporting the calculation, but the result should be revealed to some third party, especially not to them. So what they have is that the companies have some kind of database on employment, on how many people they have, what kind of numbers, how many taxes they paid, something very critical. And they want to compute statistical analysis on that, so especially the sum and the average and so on, without revealing the numbers to the other parties. So you see, who should be able to compute the data and how should it be computed so that it does not learn any private data, especially what kind of margins they had, what kind of salaries they paid. They don't want to reveal it, they don't want to give it out of their company, this information, but still they want to compute an average over all companies. Another example is, so that we will also look into, another example is that you want to just use the computation power of the cloud without revealing what you compute, what data you have, what numbers you want to compute, what your operations are. So you want to compute A plus B without revealing A plus or B. Okay. What is also used, collective network anomaly detection. So basically there are various network providers, they provide data, they want to get the result, and some of them are running compute servers, okay. So we have various companies here who provide network logging data. They don't want to reveal it to their competitors, but they want to find out what's the common activity, malicious activity, let's say, that's going on. How can we learn from this together? So every time the same setup, you have some private information you want to keep private, but you want to compute on it in a bigger sense to retrieve some kind of, let's say, statistical information. Another example is an auction that has been actually taking place for sugar beet, where basically there are different parties. They have a bid, the highest bid, and the only thing that is learned is who had the highest bid and I think what the highest bid was, but not what the bids of the others were. So you just want to compute basically who won the auction and with which highest bid, but not the actual, so the numbers of the others. It's very similar also to this millionaire's problem, who has the highest wealth, the largest wealth. So it's what is the biggest number. It's here again, what's the biggest number, but here at least the result will be revealed. And any kind of survey, any kind of statistics that compute sum and average and standard deviation and so on, that's also classical examples where you have various data providers. They don't want to reveal the actual data, but they want to compute over all data, the sum, the average, and standard deviation and so on. So the question is, how can you hide data from the computing party? So you want to compute A plus B without revealing A plus or B. So let's have a look at different solution categories. First, we will have a look at traditional approaches, where you have centralized servers in use. Then one variant with differential privacy. We will have a look at what this is. Then we go into, let's say, trust in user control, not in the server. Then we go into trust in hardware or cryptography. And then we go into not trusting anyone. So with secure multi-party computation distributed architectures. Okay. So let's have a look at the common case, what is nowadays happening. So let's assume this is a good company. It deals with the data properly. It enforces all kind of security policies. The people are trustworthy. Yeah, let's trust the company. Obviously, it might happen that trust is misused, servers hacked, data sold or leaked. So this kind of, if you have to trust on the proper, basically on the morality of the company that you are using, that might lead to some kind of disappointment. So there are the data breaches happening. So the problem is that if we have the data in plain text on the server, then obviously the server can be hacked. Let's say we encrypt the data on the server. Let's say we make it a little bit more complex. So this is the data. It's not anymore available. So A and B are not just lying around, but there's some encryption key that needs to be used before computation. Maybe even we have to load first the encrypted A and the encrypted B, and then in the runtime we load the key and we decrypt them, and then we make the computation, and then we encrypt it again. I don't know, A plus B is now also encrypted. Yeah, the problem is, I mean, either you access the data directly or you get the key and access the data. So in order to be able to decrypt A and B, you need to have the key lying around, and that's a little bit more effort for the attacker, but it's still accessible. We will have also a look at what happens if the key is not at the server, but you still compute with the results. What can you compute with the encrypted version of A and encrypted version of B? That we will also have a look. So what if the user has the key, but you just perform some kind of operations on the encrypted data? So let's see so let's say, for example, RSA. So how was the encryption happening? So we had M, that was our message, to the power of E mod N, right? Mod N. And let's say that, let's say our first number is E, and we have B. What kind of operations can we perform on A and B, on the encrypted versions of A and B? So if we just have these numbers, can we do any reasonable computation on this? So what does this mean? That means we have here a E times. We have here B. What is the result of So for example, mod N. So we could at least multiply these two numbers when we multiply the encrypted version of them. Then the result is still correct. Yeah, that might be an option, to leave the key at the user and to compute something with the data he left encrypted at the machine, at the remote machine, but let's see what we can do with this idea. But in general, trusting the server in maintaining your key properly, that is just historically proven not well working. So this will be an ongoing example that we will pick up in different technology discussions. So let's say we have here three data providers. We want to compute a full statistical analysis. That means sum, average, standard deviation, and so on, min, max. So first, that's a traditional approach. We gather the data, we compute on that, and somebody else gathers the data and uses the data as well. So it's not ideal. Let's have a look at another centralized approach where we also have a server, but which uses some kind of other idea. And the idea is, it's novel in that sense. We modify the data. So if we have previously the values 10, 3, and 7, we modify these values so that they are not anymore 10, 3, and 7. And the idea is that anybody operating on that number should not learn anything new about individual people present in the database. So that means what you want to have eventually is, if you have a database, so with John's data, and you have a database without John's data, it should lead to the same, very similar output, so that you cannot differentiate whether the data of somebody specific is inside or not. That's the aim of differential privacy. Imagine two otherwise identical data sets, one with the information in it, one without it. Differential privacy ensures that the probability a statistical query will produce a given result is nearly the same whether it's conducted on the first or second database. So you should not be able to learn from your queries whether someone's specific data is inside or not. Because if you cannot tell whether data is inside, it cannot be personally identifiable, because personally identified information is only personally identifiable if you can say for certain that person is there. But if the probability that the person is inside or not, the database is equal, you will not be able to make a claim that that person is inside. So what is the idea? Yeah, let's have a look at this. This is again the same description, and what we have here, this is the probability that how to describe it. I mean, so that the probability that we are operating on database 1 and the probability that we are operating on database 2 are very similar with up to a specific factor. So there's some kind of privacy loss. So the larger the number of this factor, the more we drift apart from being equal. And how can you imagine it? So if you have here the different kind of data sets, and this one contains the information of John, then the difference between both of them, how they are diverting, should be smaller than this epsilon, what is our parameter for privacy loss. So you can basically tune how much. There will be a trade-off. So adding this kind of privacy element will lead to some other consequences that you don't want to escalate. So you want to keep it low as well, but at the same time you keep also the privacy low. So you have to find the right balance, and basically by being able to parameterize it, you can tune how much privacy loss you accept. But let's see how this is done. And the main idea is if this is, I find this image quite okay. So the idea is, if you have specific numbers, so we had the numbers, I think 10, 3, and 7, is that to every of these numbers, you add some kind of random function. So actually this is and the random function is distributed according to this. So if it's, at the end the numbers might be, I don't know, here +2, here -1, and here -1, or it can be -15, +8, +8 or so. So that at the end, if we compute the sum over all numbers, so if you give some kind of random number plus minus equally distributed to all numbers in that set, the sum in average as expected will be the same. Yeah, so if you have a small kind of randomness added, the sum is still 20. The sum was previously 20, and now the sum is, it's so 10 minus 15 and so on. So it will be, let's say, 21. So it's in average it will be 20. It will stay the same, but there might be some kind of, the more noise you add, the more there might be some kind of deviation from the true rule. So I mean, if we have this kind of distribution of values added to every single value, then the average will remain the same, the sum will remain the same, standard deviation will differ, but min and max will also be computable. And that's the idea. To basically, here we have an example. We want to compute the sum. We add to every number a random number in addition with a number from this range, -1 and 1. And so let's say to 0 we added, to 1 we added -1, then +1, +1, -1, +0, and then the result might be the same. But, so the statistical properties of the whole data set is aimed to remain the same, but if you ask for individual data, so give me the sum of one single value, then you don't get the right results. So it basically blurs the vision. The big picture remains the same, but the detailed picture is blurred. That's the idea. Okay. I wanted to show you some kind of example. So this is some kind of, so there's a data set, so I mean there's public data sets which offer you, which you can download and you can have a look, and this is some kind of data set. Let's see, what is this about different companies, department, union, job, family, job, what kind of salaries, employee ID, overtime, other salaries and so on. So basically what you have here is, if you have this kind of personal and critical data and you want to compute the average and the sum and so on, then you don't want to reveal the data of individuals. And what is, if you would just regularly display this, would be the graph representing the distribution. And now when we apply the noise to it, then the idea is to sort these by the availability. So how often do these numbers occur? Yeah? And the idea is to give rare values more noise. If you have, I don't know, values 100, 200 times available, then your single value will not be so identifiable, so it's unclear. Or let's say we just have 3 numbers that the values can be 0, 1, 2, and every one of them is equally available, and I don't know, you have the number 2. Somebody looking at the data cannot differentiate whether you are in or not, because all the numbers are equally distributed. But if you have 1 4 out of it, that single 4 might be identifiable because it's outstanding, it's unique, and then it's the only one with that number. So the idea is the more rare the value, the more noise it gets. So if something is available quite often, then it gets less noise. If it's very rare, then it gets more noise. So let's have a look here. And these are the same numbers. And if we would have the actual real average calculation, then we are at around 67,000 or so. And if we compute over the differentially private data, where every data gets this kind of noise, then the average is very close as well. It's just $22 or so different. So you see, by changing the numbers, it's statistical. So you will get some error, but you can take influence on how much error you will get. But in average, the results will be very similar. as I said, this is over all data sets. Yeah, we have, let's say, 45,000 data sets. If you only look at the first 100 rows, then previously that was the average, and now this might be the average. How does this come? So I mean, if for example you add some value to every data element, and just by chance the first ones are just with plus, and later on only the minuses come. So if you have just some statistical imbalance and which values you add, if you count it over all values, it's still correct. If you count it over the first ones, there might be some bias. So what I want to say is you cannot, it acts like some kind of blurring filter, where the more you have a look at the whole data set, the data is correct, average sum and so on, but the more you try to narrow it down on a specific data set, individual data set, let's say the first 10% or so, or first 100 entries, then the blurring happens. Yeah, so that's the idea. So because let's say these are the first, I don't know, 100 samples. This was how the addition happened, so where you get more or less. And the more samples you take into, the more it is equaling each other out, obviously. So if we just have 100 samples, then we are quite off with our estimate. If we have, okay, these were 10 samples, then we have here 100 samples, we are getting closer. By 1,000 samples, we are getting even more closer. So the more samples we have, the closer we get. So what I want to say is, with differential privacy, by adding to every number before calculating the average and statistical information and so on, you get this blurring filter. Basically, the more data you look at, the clearer the results. The more you fine-tune, and the smaller your sample size, the blurrier the results. Okay. What's the problem that still is open? The problem is if you ask very detailed questions. So if you are able to make some specific kind of constraint on what you ask. So let's say if you are below 18 years old and work in DPH public health, and I don't know, have the user ID 50,063. So if you want to find out this red line, you could aim to state more and more detailed questions, where basically where is it? Where basically you'd want to query the data of one row directly. Obviously, the first time you find out, okay, she's receiving, I don't know, minus 15,000 K a year. The next time you get 20,000, 200,000 K a year or so. The next time it's 50, the next time it's something. So it's, if every query would apply this kind of noise individually, so if you question the same person multiple times, 100,000 times or so, then obviously these random values, these pluses and minuses, will even out as well, and you will get the correct result. So this 141. So if the attacker is able to constantly ask new questions for the same data set, and every time you have to add noise, the noise cancels out over very, very many requests. It's the same, basically. It's another example is if you are able to, so let's say you have the data set A, you start so you compute the sum over all salaries, let's say, and it's quite correct. Then Alice joins, and you ask for the sum, you find out what the salary of Alice is. If you know that Alice is inside. So there's, for a given data set where no new members come into, it's working. Then you can hide basically the details, and the broad view is still valid. If you have individuals joining, you could find out what they earn. I don't know. I mean, you can find out information on them. Okay. So, what other issues do we have? Yeah, I mean, the noise distribution should cancel itself out. As I said, if you ask for the salary of Alice, if you somehow can identify her somehow by, I don't know, any kind of strange queries, and you get this number list, then over the time you can find out what her actual value is. So the question is, should we also add some noise for if the same query is asked multiple times? So should we have some kind of history or some kind of state recognized that asks for the same thing all the time, every time again, in order to avoid this? So this is still an open issue, and it's another issue where to apply it. So we have two options where to apply this kind of noise. Option number one, let's say these are the data providers, Alice and so on. Everything is stored in the database, as we had it in the example. And now somebody is querying the database. And this is where we apply the noise, basically to either when applying here the noise for the computation, or applying there the noise when answering back. And basically the querier might be the untrusted and potentially malicious element that tries to find out data from the people here, down here. But the question is, or we can also have a different position where we add the noise, is basically when the people upload their data. So they have to trust the the database manager. So basically that their data that they upload is not misused. And this is the same server, same setup that we had previously. So we have to trust the server. And as we have seen in the previous example, it's not really valid. So this is a problem, because you have to trust the server, but this is also a problem. What problem do you see? If everybody would add the noise to their own data, so let's say they all know, okay, we have to add in the range of, I don't know, 8 to -8 or so, I don't know, -8 to 8. I mean, just some created range that they should add as a noise. They just run the random function, and they get some number in between this range, and then they add it to their number they hand in. What problem could emerge? How could we still leak the data of individuals? Or what? So one hint, the question will be what's the range? What's an appropriate range to add as noise to numbers uploaded to a system? Exactly. I don't know. That's right. Because let's say we're talking about salaries, then adding 10 more or less doesn't make a difference. But to an age, it might make a difference. Or adding plus minus 100, then obviously for the age it doesn't make sense. It just cancels any kind of link to any person, because you get a age that everybody could be. But if you add it to salaries, then it's not working. So you have to know upfront what the average is and what kind of noise to add in order to upload the right data. So you have to have knowledge about the data before it has been uploaded. That's not ideal, not well working. Okay, so far in trusting the server. This one is anyway difficult. Differential privacy is sometimes going to be applied if it's about that the companies know, okay, they have some critical data, they want to make others benefit from it, but they don't want to reveal their data explicitly. So sometimes they use it. Still, you have to trust the company, but it's a little bit more security against external attackers. Okay, data wallets. I have it here on the slides, but it's so simple that I even don't have an additional slide to it. So let's say you have your fitness data or so that you are collecting over the day. You leave it on your device. So you have data wallets, you have it on your smartwatch, and it's up to you to deal with it, who is allowed to compute with it, whom you hand over your data, such as whom you hand out your data to. So you have a free decision function, and you are in charge of handling your data and taking care that somebody who asks you for your data, you check and you provide the data and so on. But it's not really solving the issue. It's more shifting the burden of decision, or let's say it just shifts it to the user, and the user should be in charge to handling its data, but that's not realistic. Also, let's have a look at zero knowledge proofs. I will not go into detail there as well. It's more about authentication, less about data handling, but I found it in this context quite interesting. Do you know zero knowledge proofs? Have you heard? Yeah?
So we can reveal that we have some kind of knowledge, but we don't want to reveal the knowledge itself.
Exactly. So it somehow relates to this issue that we have. So we have data, we don't want to reveal it, but we want to confirm that we have it, or we compute on it at least in some way. And I found as an analogy this quite good. So I can assert to you that I know where Waldo is. He's standing beside a pair of green shoes and red boots as well to the right of him. And everybody who knows the secret can verify, and anybody who doesn't know cannot. So I think there he is. And everybody who wanted to verify knew the results. So there are the green shoes, there are the red boots. Could check it, and this is some way to. I mean, technically it will not happen with pictures. Obviously, it's more about some kind of challenge and response, and using the information without. So you get the challenge. You have to use the information to actually interact with that challenge. You send over the result, and you are not revealing your secret. You just show that you are capable of revealing the security. I mean, to support the challenge in a correct manner, and the requester can then verify that you really have that secret. Otherwise, you could not have known. Okay, so far for it, I don't want to go too much into detail on this. That's technically can also go deep, but we want to focus on computation. And in order to talk about computation, what else can we do? And here the question is computation on encrypted data, trust in hardware or cryptography. So now we want to rule out basically the trust in the server provider and the computation server provider. It's just about assuming that the server provider, the admin, is malicious as well. So this is the assumption now. What can we do? So we do not trust the server. We assume the server is not trustworthy. Okay. So, one of the options for secure computation, again, the use case we have is we want to compute A plus B without revealing to the computing party that we computed A plus and B. Plus might be revealed, but it will be revealed here, but A and B will not be revealed. So, and the idea is that the processor developers, IBM and also AMD, have introduced, so 10 years ago, some concept called Security Guard Extension, SGX. In AMD it has a different name, but it's all going to the same direction. In principle it's the same. So the idea is you have some kind of trusted part of in your processor which is not even accessible by the administrator of the system. So the administrator is not trusted to access it. It's just it's some kind of vault, some kind of protected area, and only pre-signed algorithms that have been considered by IBM as trustworthy are allowed to run there. So that before adding some kind of application there, some kind of code there, it has to be first verified by IBM, so that they check, okay, this is the input values and they are not revealed and you are doing something proper. So for example, it can be used for secure hardware, secure key generation, because the key itself will not be revealed. It stays in that container until it's somehow stored in a specific way. I mean, you decide what you do with it. There's some kind of protected memory, not even the administrator can access it. It's authenticated, requiring that Intel verifies the code and signs it, and only then it can run. So basically, how you can use it is, let's say you have some kind of code and that expects to receive some kind of key or compute some key. Then you create this enclave, you do the secure elements there, and then you hand over, I don't know, the encrypted data or whatever you use the key for, and everything that has happened here is not revealed to the running system, to the administrator. He cannot, so you can shift computation somewhere else. You first, basically the process is as following. Critical operation must be done in a trusted environment, decrypt secret input and so on. So what happens is that if this is the computing party, there's some kind of signature of Intel that they verified the software, that it's really correct. There's some attestation response, and basically this they can show to a client that they have been attested, it's really running that service on the machine. So the client can interact with that server, and for example, if the source code showed, okay, before retrieving the secure data of the client, you first enter the enclave, the secure part, you retrieve the data of the customer, then you process it, compute the sum, the average and so on, and hand back the result to process it further on, but the input of the customer will not be revealed. So this is somehow some kind of secret memory. Every program needs to be verified. It's some trusted enclave within an untrusted computer. And that it's really running, that specific enclave is coming from the signatures of Intel, and that has not been modified and so on. So you can verify before handing over your data. That's really the program that has been verified by Intel. What ideas do we have on this? It's very efficient. I mean, it's running purely on the CPU. It's not really slowed down by anything. There are various databases on top of this kind of element. So basically the database itself is encrypted, so you cannot see anything, but any computation on this database is taking place in this enclave, and then you have all the data is always stored in a secure manner in the enclave. the computations are done in the enclave, and you have basically that the computing party can compute on something that it cannot see. Yeah, I mean, you can even run legacy applications in the enclave. I mean, you can even shift, I don't know, Thunderbird or so, totally in the enclave in order. It depends on the size, obviously. It depends on, and it allows you to run, yeah, in general applications in a secure environment without having to trust the administrator. Okay, the problem is, yeah, it's secure memory is not, yeah, it might be not too secure. It partially it works, partially not. So analyzing timings, you can still learn something about the data in the enclave, about cache access and so on. Speculative code execution. The keys, attestation keys, can also be stolen. So if Intel especially, I mean, these CPUs are out there, and they accept programs that have been attested by Intel, and once they lose potentially these keys, then it becomes worthless, because any kind of software can then be attested. And the biggest problem for industry is every algorithm needs to be verified. So just assume you program and you have your code, and then you ask Intel to verify that you are not doing anything malicious. And then you identify a bug, then you have to start the process again, you have to ask them again. Every time you change the code, you have to ask them to verify it again. So it works somehow. It might also solve some of the generic issues, but the problem is here really you have I mean, it breaks the system how it was before. Previously you wrote code, it was running on software, on hardware. Now you have to know what kind of hardware it is, what kind of CPU it is, whether it supports the security or not. So it's getting really not so practical anymore. Okay, let's have a look at another example that's now totally not related to hardware, and that's homomorphic encryption. Homomorphic means equally shaped encryption, and the main idea is if we have some kind of plain data field, yeah, M, and we can encrypt the data to encrypt the M, and here we have some kind of operation so such as a plus. It has a corresponding operation in the encrypted realm that can be multiplication, that results in a new encryption, that if you decrypt it, results in the correct result. That's the example that we had here with, let's say, RSA encrypted M1 times M2. That's, so if you want to compute basically the F, in this case is the multiplication, it will be M1, this is now F2, that's the second operator, and we can compute basically, so here in the encrypted space, this is the encrypted M1 multiplied with the encrypted M2, sorry, not M2, so, but, and once we get this, we can decrypt it and it will be correct again. So this is the simple example. Oh yeah, here we have it as well. So just what is there to notice, the operation in this case was exactly the same. In some other cases it's not the same. So especially when we look at different encryption mechanisms. So RSA, that's mapping to the same. So multiplication and division. Let's zoom in. But there are other kind of encryptions. I don't know. XOR will be equivalent to multiplication in the ciphertext world, or plus and minus will result in a multiplication and division, or plus is transferred into multiplication. So typically, you have to check what is the actual encryption operation, how does it deal with the association rule. So what if you get, sorry. So what if you get, so what is the corresponding operation at least? And the idea is, okay, so first the user encrypts his data locally. Then he sends this data to the server. The server applies the corresponding function on the encrypted value. And the result is then sent back to the user. And the user then retrieves the data, decrypts it, and has then the result. So basically, you send your encrypted data somewhere, it's computed, and then you get it back, the result, and then you can decrypt it, and the server did not learn what it did the computation on. Yeah. So let's have an example for this. The simple addition of two values in the cipher domain. So we have two values A and B. Second party should add them, but not learn A and B. Okay, so A and B, and the result should be secret. Okay, so let's say we use as encryption x to the power of e, or the key, as in RSA, and the encryption is this. Then we can really play it through. So if this is A and B and this is the key, then we could calculate this is the encrypted value, that's the encrypted value of B. These two values are sent, as it's difficult to revert the computation. They can be revealed, everybody can see that, that's no problem. And now the second party can compute the product, that's this. And now we try to take the square root. So now it was sent to the user again. Now it needs to be decrypted. We want to compute the square root, and it works out. Yeah, it's correct. So 3 times 5 equals 15. Great. You can test it yourself for various encryption mechanisms. It will work.
It says A plus B.
Ah, sorry. Didn't I want to? It should be. Thank you. This is what we wanted to have. Is it right? Is it right? No, it should be multiplication. That's right. I'm not sure. No. I think it's not corresponding to multiplication. One moment, because if we have A plus B to the power of, if you would have plus, I don't know, A plus B to the power of, let's say the key is 2, isn't that and it's not a, so this term is in this case not matching, but for multiplication it works. Okay, what problem do we see? Oh, let's say how can you learn something about computation? So you did not learn anything about A and B. So the computation, this was visible to the computing party, this was visible to the computing party, this was visible to the computing party. What did we learn? Especially, what would you learn if you have some kind of ciphertext times a ciphertext equals the first ciphertext? What would you learn from this? If you have very simple, I go A plus B equals A. What can we learn? C times D equals C. Yes, so A is 0 and D is 1. So you learned already something about this. Sorry, yeah, you're right. You're right. That was a check. So very good. Okay. And then you find out, okay, later you see the computation D plus D equals E. And you know, okay, this was 1, this is 2, and so on. So over time, over the computations that you observe, you could learn something. What could we do? Okay, so here's the problem. So if you have this example, then we learn something about the setup, about these numbers. What could we do? So what we need to do is basically, what is the problem? The problem is that these two numbers represent the same number. Yeah. So, and over time you could learn the matchings of these numbers. So this is 0, and because you could clearly see that these, the one on the left, the one on the right is equal. And here with that was also, if we could see this C is equal to that C, then we could learn something about D. If we can see this D is equal to that D, then we could learn something about further up. So if one identical number, let's say 5, always maps to the same value, these kind of value to encrypted value matching can be learned. So what we want to achieve is, let's say that the encrypted version of 5, I mean, if we encrypt it, it should not be, so just imagine you would encrypt, I don't know, 1. So obviously that would be different numbers, different encryptions. And why don't we have just some various functions that give us, as an encryption for 5 different values? So to introduce some kind of noise again. So if you add here 0.1 and then you skip the last, I don't know, if you make the cut here, yeah, then you are fine. So we want to add some kind of noise, and you can think of it as, this is the number 5, this, and by adding a little bit noise to it, eventually this is RSA and or some kind of encryption, so it's always a number. So you get a little bit distance from your original point. Yeah, so you add a little bit noise, and then now we don't have anymore the effect A plus B equals A, because now it will be written A plus B equals C. So we will not identify that this is the same number, because through the noise the encryption turned it to something completely different. So we cannot anymore match our plain text. So any issue? So let's say if through every operation we add a little noise to it. Noise could add up, exactly, and noise is adding up. That's the problem. And this is the so-called somewhat homomorphic encryption. Noise accumulates. There's only a limited number of operations possible. So if every time you get a little bit further away from your origin, you might, I don't know, get into some region where the result would be wrong. So you have only a given amount of operations before the noise is too high. And now there was some work 15 years ago or so, who, let's say you have 100 operations that you can do. What this work does is it takes this 100 operations before the noise gets too large. 99 of them it uses to reset the noise, and then does one correct operation. So it resets the noise. Okay, it's a little bit more expensive even, 10,000 operations in order to have one valid operations on top. So basically it's as one valid operation, and then you reverse through all the other 9,900 operations the noise to zero again, so that it looks different. You exchange the keys, you have a new keying scheme. There's no noise anymore, but the results look different. But you had to add, let's say, a 10,000 operations in addition for your A plus B. And this is the full homomorphic encryption, because now this is not anymore limited in the operations. So now you can, on this encrypted data, compute as many operations as you want, but after every operation you have to re-encrypt, basically. New keys are established and so on. And it's very expensive, 10,000 operations for the re-encryption, one for the addition. Yeah, pros and cons. It works, yeah. I mean, you can compute securely on your data. You can upload your data anywhere in an encrypted format, and the computing party doesn't have to be trusted. It just computes over that encrypted data, and then you retrieve your encrypted data, and everything is fine. But it's very slow. I mean, it's more than 1 million times slower than on plain text. 1 bit plain text leads to 1 megabyte ciphertext. It's exploding, basically. But it's used for building encrypted databases for remote storages and so on, so that somebody else really. So it's operational. It works. It's inefficient, but it works. So this is the main idea that has been used for various follow-up projects. Basically, there are some kind of encrypted databases that follow this idea. So yeah. So basically, the idea is, let's say there are some participants with private input. Typically, you have this front-end application database set up in regular tools, because this homomorphic encryption is quite far away from a real application. I mean, you cannot say, I want a website based on this. But what you typically have is you have a front-end application database, and now you want to have some secure database, basically, so that the data stored here is secure and private and so on. But you don't want to change your web server application or your front end or so. So you just want to replace the database by a secure database. And what it does, so this encrypted database, they introduce some kind of secure SQL proxy that uses a regular database. So you basically have this kind of setup where you have the regular application. So on the left you have the regular user, then you have the regular application, then the gray part in the middle is your database proxy, and on the right you have a regular database. And the data, both for inserting the data and for retrieving the data, has to go through the proxy. So the proxy is in charge of doing the encryption. Otherwise it's database application front end. So, and what happens now? So basically you configure for your database, for your application, that it should use this database, this proxy, and this proxy uses the regular database. And in between, it keeps keys, it has some annotation, so it knows where to store data, but especially it encrypts all data that's going in and that's going out. So every data that is stored has to go through the proxy, and it's encrypted, and every query that the user has here, so let's say the application wants to retrieve the data of, I don't know, it wants to compute something and it wants to get the subset of the entries with a common match. So then the proxy can basically perform the computation. I mean, it uses the encrypted data, it has the keys available, or it uses homomorphic encryption, can do the computation on the encrypted data and deliver the results back to the application. So basically, it's like embedding this kind of technologies in a bigger system so that it can be usable. And the front end and the application and the database remains intact because the application just thinks, okay, I'm using a regular database. The database that you use, it gets some data to store. It's everything encrypted, so it cannot understand it, but that's a database. It just stores the data, and the user, anyway, the front end is not changed. Some examples here. So what they, for example, support, this is CryptDB. You can select what kind of security element, what kind of security level you want, and then you can learn what kind of operations are supported. Okay, so let's say if we want through randomization, I don't know, select, update, delete, count. So if you have some index and you can select based on the index, update based on the index. So if you randomize the index, obviously you lose the track of which data belongs to what, and you can delete, I don't know, line 25. If it uses a homomorphic encryption to compute the sum and the plus, or to multiply, it can search by equality, non-equality, different, in or not in. But for example, what you cannot do is smaller than. Yeah. Is it right? Yeah. Let me just think. So you cannot determine some of the. Let me just see. So average is difficult to. Average is also computable. So it is somehow powerful. I mean, it can do something. So it's there are different kind of levels. What is supported, what kind of security. So I don't know. So it tries to really offer a comparable usage option as regular databases, but the data is encrypted. It's rather six times slower than regular databases. It can be used commercially. I mean, it's regularly embedded in the system setup. Sometimes the order of the elements reveal the order. Yeah, there are extensions. I don't want to go too much into detail, but basically, let's see what kind of trade-off there is. So if you have plain text, then everything is revealed. If you have property preserving encryption, that means that the same numbers result in the same encryptions. Obviously, that's revealing less information, but still not so good. You can also hide access patterns. That's not covered at all. So if somebody's asking always for the same data in the proxy as well, then that could also be used to identify what it's used for. Hide result sizes and so on. You can add various additional security elements to it. But the idea is to have basically here some kind of database that is embedded in the regular system that uses this homomorphic encryption for the data of one user. So the question is, who can provide the data? Who provides the data needs to have the key to encrypt the data properly. And when retrieving the results, as well to use the key to decrypt. But you have one user, one key. So it's just a database of one user. Let me just see. Maybe to leave it at that. So basically, this is also the biggest issue with this kind of homomorphic encryption is, if you want to compute A plus B and A and B is coming from you, then you can use homomorphic encryption. But if A and B is coming from different persons, then they cannot use it, because they need to they need to encrypt it with the same key in order to be computable. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And the problem is, let's say two parties A and B can agree to compute it. But now we have had this example with the salaries. Where is it? So let's say these salaries from different people, they all just provide their data using their encryption key, and now you want to compute the average. That's not working. So it's just it just works when it's just for one single person. Okay, so far for now. We will have a look the next time at the further alternatives. I'm looking forward to see it in the labs. I saw that there have been